again, welcome to Shed Talk, my weekly magazine video series looking at the keeping, breeding and showing of caged birds with a special focus on the exhibition style budgerigar. First thing to say, I suppose, is Happy New Year to you all. Welcome to 2024. Good heavens, that's already. Anyway, so I hope you all had a very, very enjoyable New Year and holiday period. I know I certainly did, although I am still suffering. I think I mentioned it in the last video. I am still suffering with a little bit of the after bits of a cold. So do excuse the voice, and if I cough a little bit more often than normal, do excuse that as well. Please, it's just, you know, these things happen, don't they? So anyway, so what have we got for you in this episode? Well, as the title suggests, the first thing we're going to do is have a quick look at what we've got going on in the shed in January. And the other thing is we're going to talk a little bit about bird, or ring number one is what I think we're going to call it, ring number one. And I'll explain a little bit why I want to focus on that particular bird when we get to that part of the episode. The other thing we're going to do is I've had a couple of questions come in via the comment section on the YouTube page. And whilst I will answer or have answered, hopefully by now, the people who ask the questions on the comments page as well, what I thought I'd do is just go through my answer and my thought process behind that a bit more widely into the wider audience. And the other thing is, of course, it does allow me to go into a little bit more detail in the video than it would do when I'm just, you know, typing away on the answer in the comments page. So I will do that. There were two questions I think that came in, so I will do that. And of course, if you've got any questions, do leave them in the comments and I'd happily answer them. I will say again, and I've said this probably since the beginning of starting this, the answer I give is how I do it. Not necessarily the correct answer, but it is how I do it. And other people, other breeders may do it slightly differently. So you can, you know, take my answer, follow the advice that I'm giving, or alternatively go to another breeder who may give you slightly different advice and follow their advice. So I will give you a truthful answer in the way I do it in my shed. Anyway, as always, if you enjoy this episode or any of the other episodes, don't forget to hit the like button. I would love at some stage to get to 30 likes on one of the videos. I think I've got about 28 is the maximum I've ever had on a particular video. I'd love to get up to 30, so do hit the like button. Let's see if we can break the 30 in 2024. And of course, as I've just previously said, don't forget to comment on this video or anything you've seen in this video, or anything else if you have any questions. Most importantly, of course, is please do subscribe to the channel, and if you want early notifications, I forgot what I was going to say now. I was just thinking about the total amount of noise that's going on in the burglary at the moment. I do hope that you can hear me okay. They are all in full voice. Anyway, like I say, don't forget to subscribe. If you want early notifications, then do hit the bell. So what were those questions then? Let's get on to those. So the first question that came in was from Alan, I think it was, a new subscriber to the channel, and he's planning to breed using the colony system, so not using breeding cages as I do in here, but just letting the birds choose their own partner in I suppose a main big large flight or an aviary or that sort of thing. And I know lots of people, particularly those that aren't interested in the competitive side of the hobby, and just like the idea of having some birds and breeding with them, so I know lots of people that do that, will use the colony system for breeding. And his question was, if he's going to do that, should he split the hens and the cocks into two different flights before he decides to put them into a single flight for breeding? So it raises the question about splitting hens and cocks, whether or not it's for colony breeding or whether it's for breeding in breeding cages. And those of you that are long-standing members of the channel, have been around a little while, will know that a few years ago I did try that. I actually had cocks in one flight and hens in another flight. And the main reason I tried it was because when I was a youngster, so when I was a kid, many moons ago, that was the way most of the breeders I went to speak to bred. So they would have, they tended to split the birds into cock flight and a hen flight, and then they would put them together when they, so in the breeding cage would be the first time he would mix cocks and hens. And the thinking behind it was that, or I think the thinking behind it was that it prevented birds from pair bonding in the main flight, and therefore making it more difficult to split that pair bond when you put them into the breeding cage. Okay, so my view on this, first of all, in terms of if you're using the breeding cage technique, the idea of cocks and hens in different flights seems to have gone out of fashion. Most of the breeders I go to speak to now will tend to have just open flights with both lots in it. And my experience is that whether you split the cocks and hens, it makes no real difference to how quickly they bond in the breeding cage. They're not, the budgerigars in particular, I don't think are particularly loyal to a partner. They tend to be, you know, if you put a cock bird with a hen bird and the hen bird's in condition and wants to go down, the cock bird will bond with her and will mate with her. They are, I think, one of the great joys of the budgerigar is they're relatively easy breeding birds, or the vast majority of them are relatively easy breeding birds. So I don't think there's an advantage in terms of pair bonding for breeding cage breeding, of splitting them. The other problem you will find, and when I say a problem, it's not really a problem, is that if you've got a whole cage full of cockbirds, the cockbirds will pair with another cockbird. It's the way to do it. Even in a mixed flight, if a cockbird is in condition and is chattering away, another cockbird in condition, I find, that's chattering away, will go and they'll chatter together, you know, and so they tend to, you know, form these bonds in the flight anyway. And if you've got an all cockbird flight, they will form bonds with other cockbirds, and whether they do that in the wild, I don't know, but that's just the way they will tend to do it in the flights that I've noticed. That's what they will do in the flight. The moment you put them with a hen in the breeding cage, again, they will go straight for the hen if she's ready to go down and ready to breed. Or that's my own experience of it. So my main concern about splitting cocks and hens is with the hens. So, and it's about hens and activities. I find, again, my own personal experience, is that hens, if they're on their own, in a flight, with no cockbirds in there, they get very lazy. They will just sit on a perch, go and eat, come back and sit on a perch. If there are cockbirds in there, they tend to make more movement, partly because the cockbirds are chasing them a little bit more. So a cockbird may, you know, when a hen's in condition, she will naturally attract cockbirds to her. And that just gets her fitter, I think. So there's more activity from hens when they're in a mixed flight than when they're in two flights. So in order to answer, it's a very long way of answering the question that was asked. If you've got if you're breeding in the colony breeding, then of course it makes no difference splitting them. I would always say leave them in there together, because any advantage you might get about, you know, that we might get about making sure that pairs don't bond will be lost anyway, because you're planning to let them choose their own partner and you're not picking a partner for the breeding cage. And the disadvantage of hens becoming lazy and not having enough exercise and therefore being overweight before they go into the before they go down to breed, and therefore are less likely to for the eggs to be fertile because they're not fit, you would lose that you'll have that disadvantage of the fact that they become lazy in the flight. So I would say that if you're just going to breed colony breeding, or if you're going to breed with the nest box or in a breeding cage, there's very little advantage to splitting cocks and hens. Just my opinion. But you may want to go in, particularly if you're breeding cage, if you're using breeding cages, see what the person you're getting the birds off of, how they breed. But colony breeding, no advantage whatsoever of splitting them. You will find, I used to colony breed when I was young, very young. You will find that the hen will tend to go with more than one cockbird, and the cockbird will go with more than one hen. It's just the way they do it. They're very promiscuous birds in the wild, and likewise it's the same in an open flight. The only thing I would recommend, it almost leads me on to the next question, that I would recommend if you're going to breed in a colony breeding, make sure all of the nest boxes look very similar, ideally at the same tile of nest box, and that all of the nest boxes are at roughly the same height. If you have a nest box that looks different, or a nest box that is higher than all the others, you can guarantee the hens will fight over that particular nest box, because they will prefer it. It looks, it's just the way they are. The hens will fight over it, and you may end up with, eggs being destroyed, chicks being killed, and that sort of thing. So similar nest boxes, ideally all the same nest boxes, and all at the same height. And on the subject of nest boxes, that was the next question. A quick explanation of the type of nest box that I use. So as I say then, the second question, which came in from Jim, I believe it was, who asked about the size and style of nest box that I use. So I guess like most breeders, I use a box-in-box style nest box. This simply means that there's an outside box, and inside that is another box that just slips inside that you can pull out. I think they're a common design now. They just make checking the nest box slightly easier. All the nest boxes that I use are external nest boxes, so they fit onto the outside of the breeding cage, and rather than the inside, although I have used internal nest boxes in the last year in what I'm currently using as my stock cages. You may remember the wooden cages, they had internal nest boxes, although they could be accessed from the outside, so very similar, but they were just they went on the inside of the cage rather than the outside. Advantage of them being on the inside, I suppose, is that they are you're less likely to knock them as you're walking around, particularly if you're in a confined space. That's the disadvantage of the boxes that hang onto the outside of the cage. I suppose the advantage of them being on the outside is there's more room for the birds to move around in the confines of the breeding cage than there would be if they're on the inside of the breeding cages. So there's a couple of advantages and disadvantages. I've always used external nest boxes, so that's what I do. The other type of nest box that I know some people use are the letterbox type nest boxes that they sit on the ground, on the floor of the breeding cage, and they have a little flap that you lift up. I think we probably saw them in when we went out to look at Chris Green's budgerigars. So I'll leave a link across the top of across the top of the screen to that video, so and you can sort of flick through it until you can see what I mean by the internal letterbox type nest boxes. So that's the type of nest box that I use. The dimensions of the nest boxes, so they're all roughly the same size. I've got ones that are just very slightly smaller, but they're all roughly about the same size. And the size of them are, so in terms of the I suppose the length, so from front to back, as the bird would enter the nest box, so that being front to back, that's about 9 inches. I'll let you do your own conversion into metric. So that's about 9 inches in length, front to back. The depth of the nest boxes, so the top of the nest box to the bottom of the nest box, is about 8 inches, and the width of the nest box is about 6 inches wide. So that's overall the way the dimensions of the nest boxes. The nest boxes that I use are wooden nest boxes, and they're like a plywood type material. I think the advantage of the wooden ones is they are a little bit more natural, and I think they soak up the moisture a little bit better than the plastic nest boxes. The disadvantage, of course, is that they can harbour mite, which the plastic ones tend not to, and the plastic ones are much more easier to clean and to keep clean than the wooden ones. The wooden ones, at the end of the breeding season, I'm soaking these for ages and scrubbing them for ages to get them clean enough, and then lots of anti-mite treatment. But I've always used wooden. They are cheaper. Wooden ones tend to be cheaper than the plastic ones. If I had lots and lots of money, maybe I'd convert across to plastic, but I don't, so I'm sticking with the wooden. So there we are, that's the type of nest box that I use. The other thing I will say about the nest boxes that I use, and you will notice when I show you the inside of the nest boxes, is I don't use concaves. I know lots of people will swear by concaves. I've never used them. I've always put a bit of bedding in the bottom of the nest box, and I find that works perfectly well. But I've also, like I say, the other nest boxes that I used in the wooden breeding cages, they did have concaves in them, and I did leave the concaves in, and the birds bred perfectly well in there. I know some people will say that you're more likely to get splayed legs if you're not using a concave, and also that the hen may knock the eggs around a bit more, and therefore you'll get addled eggs if there isn't a concave. In terms of both of those, I've not really noticed a difference when I've used concaves and when I've not used concaves in terms of splayed legs or addled eggs. If you put enough bedding in there, I think that the hen will naturally hollow it out, and that will keep the eggs together. On that though, I will say that this year I've had one hen that I've got one chick in a nest box in their second round actually that is splayed legs. Whether that's to do with the fact that I'm not using concaves or not, I doubt it, because first round there was no splayed legs, and they had exactly the same nest box. I would say that she did clear the nest box almost out completely, and maybe I needed to have put a little bit more nesting material in there once the chicks started to hatch. We might have a look at what I've done about the splayed legs in the next episode. We certainly won't look at it in this one, but yeah, I've got one chick with splayed legs. But that's the first chick with splayed legs in the last 4 years. I think 4 years ago was the last time I can remember having chicks with splayed legs. So it's not a problem that reoccurs because I'm not using concaves. Anyway, so I hope that answers the question about the type of nest boxes that I use. But again, do some research. Other people swear by concaves. Some people never use them. Do your research and then choose what works for you in your shed. After all, it's your shed. You can do what you like in your shed. There we go. So that's the 2 questions that came in. What have we got going on in the shed for January? So we'll have a look at January, and we'll start in here in the main budgerigar shed. And the main focus in here is I need to try and get a little bit more ruthless with these breeding pairs. I've got a couple of pairs that are just not performing, and I think I've left them too long in the breeding cage rather than whipping them out when it became quite obvious that they weren't going to go down. I was seeing signs that the hen might go in, and or that the cock bird was feeding the hen, but in reality I think some of that was me being a little bit overly hopeful, because I was desperate for them to breed. So the main thing in January is I need to get some pairs out of there and get some new pairs out of the main flight to replace them with. And the good news is that the young hens sorry, pardon me, the young hens that were that you may remember when I did my sorting at the beginning of so the beginning of the breeding season, to see which were the keepers and which were the ones to go. The young hens that came top on that are all now reaching the mature age where I can get them into a breeding cage, and some of them are starting to gnaw at the wood in the flight, so I'm reasonably confident that some of those will be ready to go down very, very shortly. I just need to work out now which ones are those, and there's probably 2 cages that I need to free up and get 2 of the better hens, the hens that I really want to get something off this year, into them. So be more ruthless in January. That's my New Year's resolution. I need to be more ruthless with the what I put into the breeding cages and how long I give them in there. Having said that, maybe we'll let the the subscribers pair in cage for a little bit longer than I might otherwise would do, seeing as you picked that particular pair. So that's the main thing then in here for January. I will have to think about, I've got a show mid-February, so again in January I will have to think about whether I'm gonna, which birds I may or may not be able to get out for that particular show. So all go then with, in reality, the other thing of course we need to do is to continue getting the young birds or the baby birds, first round birds, out and try those in the, give them a bit of training in the show cage. The only thing I'd say about the first round birds of course is we shouldn't forget that they're on 2023 rings, so the rings didn't arrive until after I'd rung all those. Sorry, I did say I had a bit of a cold, so I do apologise for that. Yeah, so like I say, they're on 2023 rings, so it's unlikely that they'll go out in the bear with me 2 seconds, I'm just going to get a quick drink and I'll be straight back. Well, I've got my coffee, so hopefully if I have another coughing fit I can just have a quick drink of this. So there we go. So where was I? Right, yeah, so they're on 2023 rung, so 2023 rings, so they're unlikely to get out into the show team because A, they're going to be, you know, smaller than the adult birds that I've got. Baby birds always tend to be a bit smaller, and they can't go in the young bird section because even though they're this year's birds, they were rung with 2023 rings, so which means they can't be in that section. But I'll still give them some showcase training. Anyway, I do apologise for this tickly cough. I've had it for a couple of well, almost a week now. Hopefully it's on its way out. Anyway, so that is what's going on in here in January. Let's go out now into the finch and five flight and talk about the fives. So back out in the finch and five flight out here. I'm not going to spend too long out here for partly because this is going to be quite a long episode with lots and lots of me just talking anyway, but the other reason is there's not a lot going on out here and it is really, really miserable outside, and in order to film this I need to keep all of the doors open, or I need to keep the door open, just because there's not a lot of room inside here and I really don't want the horrible dampness that's out there getting much more in here than it needs to be. So really I suppose, and that's been the story of at the end of last month and the beginning of this month I suppose, is that it's been a very, very wet, windy and miserable period, but fairly mild. So I'm having to keep an eye on the birds to make sure that overall sort of dampness in the air isn't getting to any of them. It shouldn't do. It's nice and dry in here, so it shouldn't really be getting to them too much. But with the mildness that we've got around, I have noticed that almost all of the cock birds are singing, strangely enough, apart from the new one I brought in. And a number of the hens, particularly in the flights, are beginning to start carrying, and it really is very, very early for that. So yeah, I'm a little bit concerned that they're too far forward. I think I had a similar comment when I first started breeding them last year, that they seem to be carrying very, very early. I don't know if you can hear the canaries singing at the moment. So yeah, so very early for them to be I think, or it feels very early for them to be, certainly for the hens to be carrying, so I just need to watch that. Light on in here, so the light comes on in here at 7:15 and goes off at 4:45, so we have 8 hours worth of light in the shed, and I am building that up a little bit each week until we hit the 14 hours of lights on. So other than that, it's really the feeding regime in here at the moment is pretty much the same as it has been over the winter period. They're getting a small amount of soft food every other day, and they're getting none of the tonic seed at the moment. Otherwise they're just getting a plain canary mix. So other than that, that's just about all they're getting. Both, I'm giving the same thing in the flight cage as well, but mainly thinking about bringing the birds that are in the breeding for separate cages that I'm planning to breed with this year, bringing them in condition and keeping them on a fairly low, mainly seed diet. They're continuing to get baths every other day. I put a bath on the cage every other day, so and most of them are still using it, so even though the weather's not particularly wonderful. So that really is it from in here. What we'll do now is we'll go back into the budgerigar flight and we'll talk about that ring number 1. So before we finish, I just want to have a quick talk about ring number 1. I mentioned it right at the beginning that we were going to look at that bird and perhaps follow it through from for as long as we can, certainly for the rest of this year, or at least as long as it survives. And the reason for that is that this bird was one of the eggs that was full in cage number 1, which was off of the Watch Out cross and the grey yellow face. They produced nothing in the first round, you might remember. In the second round they had 3 eggs that were full. All of those eggs have hatched. Unfortunately the first egg hatched and the hen didn't feed it, so when I came back it had died. The second egg hatched, and by the time it hatched and got out of the shell, again I suspect partly because the hen didn't feed it straight away, that bird also died. So I was left with a bit of a dilemma as to what to do. I could have popped it into cage number 1, which was due eggs to be hatched there, but unfortunately my concern was that there were 2, it was one in that cage that was due to hatch the same time as the bird in cage number 3, and so I was worried I wouldn't be able to know which was which would have left me with a problem of when I come to ring it of which were the parent is. So the only other option I had was to pop it into cage 5. Now you may remember cage 5 I was about to split. They had a full round of clear eggs in the second round. The first round the chicks were nothing to talk about, you know, they're just nice pet birds, but she was sat on full eggs, so, and I would be able to identify which one it was. So I took the egg out of there, bearing in mind it was due to hatch the following day, and popped it under the hen in cage 5, hoping that the sudden change in behaviour of that egg, because it would have been, you know, she would have suddenly started hearing it chirping, wasn't going to throw the hen. It hatched, was fed, and as you can see from the pictures, it's reached an age where we can now ring it. So it's a bit of a survival story for this particular bird, I suppose, in that, you know, the other 3 siblings, or the other 2 siblings, sorry, were lost, and it was a last gasp effort to pop it under there. So it is growing quite well, I think, at the moment. It'll be interesting to see how it develops, considering it's stuff of the Watts bird. It is going to be a cinnamon, as you can see from the down, and we'll just wait to see whether it's a yellow face and a grey. We'll have to wait and see as it grows on. Anyway, that's ring number 1. I call it ring number 1 because it's the first bird we've run with the 2024 ring. So there we go. It'll be easy enough to keep an eye on that one. It does mean that I'm not going to be able to split this pair as soon as I wanted to. As we saying at the beginning, we're going to be ruthless with them. I could, now I've rung it, move it into one of the other nest boxes. Not going to do that. I'll let this pair bring this last chick up. Anyway, like I say, that's it for ring number 1, and that's it for this. I think this has been a slightly longer episode than I would have anticipated. Apologies that it's just mainly me talking and not a lot of looking at birds. We'll get back to that in the next episode, I guarantee you that. Like I say, it'd be really nice if you could hit the like button on this particular video. I'd like to hit 30 likes if that's possible in 2024. So do hit the like button, but perhaps most importantly, do stay safe and enjoy your birds.